Awesome, everybody. Well, welcome to the November 2022 Alpha Omega Public Community Meeting. This is a forum for y'all to ask whatever questions, learn about stuff, hear from us directly, ask us pointed questions, whatever you want. Raphael is here, so welcome. If you would like to give an update on NPM, you're welcome. You don't have to, but there's a forum for anybody to chat about anything related to AO, current, future, past, and all that. I do not have, this is my only slide. So we are.
But it's a good slide.
I like the slide. I like that. The logo is top notch. So is there anything anybody would like to talk about?
I can start. I would like just to give an update in the Node.js side. This week, actually past week, we opened two important pull requests that includes the threat model for Node.js and also a document that we call Node.js security best practices. It's pretty similar to the one that I think Alpha Omega or project related.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's creating. So basically we explain that some threats that might affect Node.js is not considered a vulnerability in Node.js and what you need to do to guard against those threats. Those are very important documents, and they were created through the security working group. It was very cool. And well,
that's really fantastic news, Raphael. It's a significant, like it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a really big deal, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, actually, I have a presentation if
Bring
you want. Yeah.
Floor is yours.
Okay, let me start sharing.
I mean,
here.
You have to have a slide at least as cool as Michael's only slide. Right?
Okay. So, I don't know if I have, but I will try.
And I will quickly add, if you have a link to it, I'd love to slip that into the notes so that people later on who just want to be able to click on the slides.
Sure. I'll share the link in the chat too, and I will share the screen. Well, okay.
I got it. Thank you so much.
So basically, I have presented those slides for the Node.js Collab Summit. It's a summit that it's a collaborative from the Node.js members. We discuss important stuff and what is the future of Node.js, what's the current threats, what's the current features, current bugs, and so on. Basically, it's pretty simple. I have showed the current security working group participants and the current initiatives. I have showed it, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or 1 month ago, more or less. And basically, the active members are Facundo, Michael, Ulysses, and Thomas. And well, the first initiative that we have concluded is one called Node.js Vulnerability Assessment Workflow. I know this is a long name, but we don't have a better. Sorry for that. Basically, one of the problems with Node.js, not Node.js, but any tool that depends on other dependencies. For instance, Node.js contains a bunch of dependencies. For instance, NG832, OpenSSL, libuv, and so on. And when those dependencies send expose or disclosure CVE, we get noticed by the users, or at least with some delay. This workflow has the intention to basically run every night and check if there are any disclosure CVE. So in case, let's say, OpenSSL just bumped critical security release yesterday. We are updating today, by the way. And we receive an issue telling, okay, this is a new CVE, we need to update because those versions is affected by Node.js. And also it's a good way to perform assessments, because For instance, that's a real vulnerability from Zleep, but does not affect Node.js. And users were complaining about these vulnerability, and that's a good repository that they can see if that affects their apps or not. The second one is the threat model. Not too much to share about it because it's pretty concise. Basically, almost 40% of our HackerOne reports were closed as a non-applicable or informative. This is a clear indicator that security research does not know, don't know how Node.js works. Because, for instance, let's say you install a package and this package perform malicious request. It's not considered a Node.js vulnerability, but if the user install it, they can be affected by it. So we need to be clear in all the things that Node.js trust and Node.js does not trust. That's the intention of this threat document. And the pull request was created, and we are discussing it with the TSC. Probably next week we'll have something ready to the public.
Rafael, can I interrupt? This is really interesting, and I'm curious, and general question to the group here. Is there a standard practice of this system here? If you're going to report a vulnerability here, here's our threat model. Please express your vulnerability in terms of this threat model. Is that a common practice and you guys are getting there, or is?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't have a strong background on that field to say, but I did some research before, and basically all the runtimes like Python or Java, PHP, they have their own threat model, and some vulnerabilities, some threats can be applied to those runtimes, but in different ways. For instance, supply chain attacks in Node.js is very common, but that's the way the Node.js works. If you want to guard against it, you need to mitigate it somehow, but it's not Node.js responsibility. And that's the point of this document. We need to make it clear that we need to express how they can guard against it, and Node.js can't.
If I may jump in real quick, I've seen some terminological differences. In my mind, as long as you get to where you're going, I don't care which words you use. Some people, refer to this as the threat model. Some people call these security requirements. I tend to call them security requirements, but whatever you call that, having some idea of what you're trying to achieve and not achieve is pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I mean, the idea of this document is to be a live document. I am pretty sure that we are missing a bunch of statements in the initial version of this document, but it will be built in collaboration with security researchers, because once we receive HackerOne reports, we say, okay, it's missing in the threat model, then let's update that. But yeah, currently the name is threat model, but it might be like what Node.js trusts or does not trust. Yeah, okay, just moving on. The idea when we started that initiative, it was just threat model, but in the middle of that document, we were adding a lot of explanation that does not that the target was not clear, and the intention of threat model, the target of threat model is security researchers, but we also want to provide a kind of explanation for end users, how they can secure their application, how they can understand how Node.js works under the hood without going deeper in the code. And then we created the Node.js security best practice document. We have a pull request. I need to update this slide, by the way. We have a pull request for both, and they are being analyzed. And that's important to say that most of our HackerOne reports are attacks that affect Node.js developers, but not Node.js users. It is important to say that developers are more susceptible to vulnerabilities because some of them just follow a hands-on tutorial on the internet. So to install a malicious, like a package with a typo that performs something very weird. I can tell one history. Let's keep this one, but let me tell this history. This was solved in prior versions of Node.js. So let's assume that you are on Windows, okay? And you have OpenSSL installed. And that's pretty common because let's say if you are on Windows and you install a game, you have OpenSSL, that's all. Then you have Node.js. And you are following a tutorial in the internet that tells you to install Fatsify with a E in the end, with a typo because it's a different one. And then this package basically contains a providers.dll inside of that package, okay? And the content of this DLL is pretty simple. Like, it's the most dangerous thing that you can do on Windows is they open the calculator, okay? And then basically, every time that you require a module that requires OpenSSL gets loaded. And by default, it searches for providers.dll in the current working directory, which means that if my malicious package Fatsify contains a script post-install just to check the npm version that internally calls require crypto, it will load the providers.dll from my current working directory, which means it will load my malicious DLL instead of the expected one from the OpenSSL. And then the user will see the calculator. So that was a real vulnerability on Node.js. It was fixed, hopefully. But yeah, that's the intention of how this thing works. And after this, well, we are basically saying in the threat model that if a package or if a DLL is not specified in the documentation, that Node.js will try to load, this is a vulnerability and needs to be reported to Node.js. This will increase the collaboration between Node.js developers and security researchers. And also, I'm working on a test. It's basically a S-trace that will check what Node.js is loading on the startup, and then we document it. And every time that we perform a pull request, we check if that changes or not, and just prevent vulnerabilities. But you know, that was a crazy one. But that's all. I have another presentation about the permission system, but I'm still developing it. And once it's done, I can share it here. Okay.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
I did have two questions, and feel free if this is outside of the bounds of what you want to talk about. Just tell me to be quiet. First one was on OpenSSL specifically. Do you guys feel like you have the right level of engagement for like advanced notification of, and it's not about OpenSSL specifically, but like for the major tools that you include in Node, you're as a platform, you know, I put you guys on par with Ubuntu or anybody else in that, you know, essentially, did you get advanced notification of OpenSSL? And if the answer was no, would exploring that further be helpful? I know you guys put the issue out and the fix out in a couple of days, and I know that it went from critical to high, but so we kind of dodged the bullet there. But
we do actually we just subscribe to their newsletter as a team, and we receive notification when upcoming security releases on upcoming security release. The only thing that we need to work on is to receive the assessment before they release, because once they release the security release itself, we basically assess it on Node.js to check if that affects Node.js or not. And then we discuss internally when should we do the security release, because normally critical or high vulnerability should be updated as soon as possible on Node.js.
Right.
But
can I jump in on this real quick? I think the OpenSSL one is a little unusual in that a lot of open source projects, the way you find out is, here's the patch. OpenSSL in this particular case basically gave a heads up to everybody publicly. We're going to have a release in a few days at this particular date. There's some vulnerabilities we're fixing. Get ready. So that's a little unusual, frankly, in the grand world. But I think it can be helpful. So, Raphael, I guess let me put you on the spot a little bit. Was it helpful for OpenSSL to have told you that at a time? And if so, is this something that we should encourage projects to do in general? Is to give heads up that we're going to make a release on this date.
yeah,
Get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. We received and we normally when we see the assessment from the OpenSSL, we start the workflow to perform a security release. Nowadays, security release on Node.js is a tough operation. It requires at least 4 releasers because it's a 42 steps to perform a security release, because we have a well-defined workflow. We have some companies depending on it that needs to be notified. And if we receive a notification like today, we can't do it because it requires at least 1 week of effort. So, for instance, if Zlib disclosure as high vulnerability that affect Node.js today or tomorrow without prior notice, certainly it will affect Node.js in a bad way.
Okay.
So
sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Well, as you can say, so what it sounds to me, and obviously, like, go back and discuss this on your end, but like, if you believe, so there were vendors that received an advanced copy of the patch from OpenSSL, like there are embargoes. This is, how things are done in those cases, and those are, just relatively small list. But if Node thinks that getting access to that in advance of public would be helpful in getting a release out at the same time as when it goes public, which is kind of how like Ubuntu did it, and Canonical and some others. Like, I would be happy to at least attempt to broker that conversation. So just put it out there, if you think it would be useful.
Yeah,
a couple days, and in this case, it doesn't really matter. But in the future,
Yeah, the case of Node.js is slightly different from the vendors that use OpenSSL directly. We don't use the main OpenSSL. We use a fork version because we use the quick protocol for the 16 and 18 version, and we basically OpenSSL release their fix. We wait for the fork from the Chromium, I guess. Let me check. No, kick TLS is the name. Let me send it here.
Interesting.
We use that fork because we have initiatives using Quick and probably in the 8v3 too. So yeah, our use case is like different because we have someone in the middle.
Okay, makes sense. So it's really quick TLS that would, in theory, need the
receive
as early as possible. But
yeah,
okay.
but usually they are very fast. Yeah. For instance, it tends to be updated in 1 day maximum.
Yeah.
So they are good.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry to get so so it sounds like you do think that it's helpful to have at least the advanced warning without the patch.
Totally.
And it might be Michael's been asked about the one with the patch. Okay, because that might Michael, this might be useful feedback to the vulnerability disclosures working group, because right now I don't think that's giving an advance, hey, we're going to have one. I don't remember if that's in their process. I don't think it is. but at least something to consider.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if all the dependents do it, would be awesome, because we need planning. We need most of the folks working on Node.js is not, they don't work full time on it, so they need to schedule. They have a schedule to work on Node.js. So yeah.
Has Node considered using Vex or something else to report when a dependency has a vulnerability, but you can determine that in fact it doesn't apply in your case?
We didn't. We have some internal discussions around that, but I'm not a part. So yeah, probably we'll have something pretty soon, but I have no idea.
Cool. And then and one other question: when you were showing the GitHub action that spits out
Yep.
zlib vulnerability, is that just like Dependabot out of the box kind of stuff, or is that something custom? Or
basically it's a pretty simple Python script that look toward dependency tree and check if there are open vulnerabilities, open CVEs that Node.js is not aware. But
okay, so it's against the vulnerability. It's against Sierras and zlib and the ones that you're using already. It's not doing a full like.
Oh, we have like a hash map or something like that.
Okay. Neat.
I just sent in the chat the examples.
Cool. Nice. Okay. Cool. Anything else on this topic?
Oh, good.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your collaboration and assistance and keeping the world safe and everything. Really appreciate it. So
yeah, pretty soon I think I will have something to share related to the permission system on Node.js. I think that will be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else? Other things anyone would like to talk about? I do have something I'd like to talk about, but mine will be the lowest priority in the stack. All right. Well, so the topic here. So I posted a message in Alpha Omega last week, maybe, and there's an open issue about it in the repo. Essentially, we wanted to get everybody's thoughts on attestations. And I'm not sure if it's an attestation or an assertion. I think it's actually an assertion, but it doesn't really matter. So here's a scenario. As part of the Omega analysis, so we find an open source project, we run a bunch of tools against it, we get some output. That output can either be probably one of three categories. The tools ran, nothing interesting was found, looks good. The tools ran, something interesting was found, but it turned out to be uninteresting after triage. Or it found something interesting and it was a vulnerability and we reported it and it got fixed. I guess maybe it didn't get fixed, but it's basically those kind of three categories. Now we could do that ourselves and just keep that information, private on which ones we looked at and what the results were, and eventually a component will have a vulnerability fix and everybody will benefit and all that. But as a consumer, and I mean as a consumer developer or a compliance department or whatever, knowing that that particular component was examined and found to be in one of those categories allows you to make different decisions that gives you knowledge that you didn't have before. So the question is, if Omega were to generate, and let's just keep this at like an abstract level, an assertion saying that we ran this tool against this component, and these were the results aggregated. So, we found, and there were no issues. There was an issue and it hasn't been triaged yet, whatever, things like that. We tried to reproduce it and we couldn't, or we could. We checked, here are the scorecard values as of like that moment in time. I don't know, you can think of other things other than static analysis too, but essentially we did some assurance work against a thing. Here's the information. You can trust it because we said so. And that's through the magic of signatures and whatnot. Would that be valuable? Would that be something that one could consume? I don't mean technically, I mean, would that be useful for anyone to consume?
Well, I'll speak up just for me, but basically, I think it is useful to know that, hey, a tool was run, it didn't find anything. While that doesn't guarantee things, guarantees are hard, and I think a lot of organizations are looking for some information. I'm looking at this package. Is there, any indications of either problems or not problems? Now, I think you have to be a little careful. If you do find a problem, I'm a little hesitant to make an indicator yet, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that for a lot of tools, false positives are absolutely a thing. So I think attestations of I ran a tool under some configuration and it didn't find anything, or it didn't find anything at a critical or a high level, is useful. I'm really hesitant to help the attackers too much. I saw your note about, hey, they can run the tools, public tools anyway, which is absolutely true. But it is a little extra work to run a tool as opposed to just download somebody else's work. So I hesitate to help the attackers too much. Look right here. But as soon as you get to the point where you can make an attestation that you don't find anything or don't find anything at a certain level, I would say go for it. I don't think you need to say, hey, didn't find SQL injections. I think that level of detail is probably not worth it, because it really just depends on the tool anyway. So, the tool, each of the tools, the tool may not find SQL injections, or may only find very specialized cases of them. So I'm not sure how strong, if you don't know the details about the tool, I'm not sure that gives you much information, and it sure will be a whole lot of extra work for probably little gain. But yeah, Tool X didn't find something, or didn't find something at certain levels. I would certainly like to know that. Of this version, obviously, version of tool and version of both version of tool, but more importantly, version of software, because obviously, 2.0 may have 0 vulnerabilities and 1.0 may be a disaster.
Yep. Yeah, and then what I'm imagining is, the consuming end of it is a reference implementation of your policy is no critical vulnerabilities, and I don't care if it's reproducible or not, let's say. So that's expressed in some policy format, and then you as a consumer, you just say, check left pad policy 123, and it says pass. So from that perspective, it would be something that, it'd be like a, pre-install test pass, test passing check.
So the producer will have to be like similar to a certificate authority, right? I mean, yes. That is producing attestations. What is preventing from like an authority spoofing, like somebody else maliciously producing some attestations that is wrong? Those are wrong.
So what I'm thinking there is, so each of these assertions would be signed in some way. The signer would either explicitly be trusted in the way that like Linux, like PPAs are, or delegated trust based on how the CA system works, or something else. I don't want to say totally like left as an exercise to the reader, but I think that I think we would do better to have this system be distributed so that, like we would run one, but others could run their own private one. So you could like point at a registry when you're doing the policy evaluation. But then more than that, you can say, I only trust A, B, and C, or I only trust people that are trusted by A, and that kind of thing. So you should be able to ignore the, if just let's just say random people are providing assertions of whatever, you could ignore them and you say, I only trust the ones from OpenSSF and my company, or only my company, or whatever.
Yeah, if I could, what do you think about the idea of signing them with like Sigstore?
I don't want to go too into what would the right implementation be.
Right,
Sigstore makes sense, like whatever. Yeah,
whatever.
It's
just that is designed to make it easier to verify, because signing is trivial as long as you don't need to verify it later. But if you don't verify it, what's the point? So yeah. So that's the I mean, it doesn't have to be Sigstore necessarily, but if we want,
it would be as I'm learning more about this, so it would be cosign either off of an OIDC thing from wherever, or I could have a hardware token or anything else that would actually back the thing. So and then
I mean, Sigstore can do either of those things. It's the OIDC that's different and unusual,
but
I mean, it can do the tokens as well. But the point is that they don't have to have your public key to be able to verify that it was, M. Scavetta at, at org or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, we would want to make it from like at minimum like Alpha Omega, not personally. And for that, we would generate it. I don't know how we would do it.
I don't think we've generated that workflow. So if you want to do that, we probably ought to. I think that's a great idea. We just need to work out how we make sure that can actually happen.
Yeah. And it might be as simple as there are a small number of signers. They all sign with a hardware token that we provide them. That we'll figure that out.
Yeah, it's totally doable. We just have to figure out what to do.
The other nice thing about this is it does provide us a way to generate manual assertions. So I took a look at LeftPad. I reviewed the code. I think it's awesome. No issues found, and I will stake my reputation on it by creating this assertion and saying, Mike Scavetta thinks this is fine, and putting this out there. So similar to the security reviews, OpenSSF, repo, this should be just another consumer. And you may decide actually as a consumer, I don't trust manual assertions because, people make mistakes and machines never do. So just blanket, provide no value to the, don't look for manual assertions.
Wow, that's a whole lot of assertion about automated systems never making mistakes. I don't believe.
I've never known
computers too often to not believe a word of that. But in fact, I think what you would like to see is multiple assertions from multiple different sources. This tool was run, this manual analysis was run, hopefully by people or organizations you actually have a reason to believe are reasonable. And then that gives, multiple signals like that give you really strong justification that, mistakes can happen, but there's been some real effort here. And I saw Rob Underwood pop up. Are you about to ask a question?
No, I'm just saying hi. Hi. We had a few of my colleagues, I think, on the phone earlier, at least until 12:30. So David, your and Brian's yeoman's effort is showing some results. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And well, for Alpha Omega, the two Michaels, one of which has, I think, had to leave early, sadly, but Michael Scavetta, Michael Windsor, they've been, very much pulling on this for a while. So, and, we've got our new awesome person, Citibank. So, I mean, there's a number of folks who are pulling this particular rope. and I'm grateful to everybody.
Well, we're hoping to get more people from our organization involved in OpenSSF generally, but Alpha Omega in particular. And I think now that we've piqued interest, it's great. So thank you again.
Awesome. Anything else on the topic of assertions, attestations?
No, not myself, but Aaron Witzlang just posted in the chat, and I think it's so important. I'd like to highlight it. Coming back to the, hey, what about posting? Find no vulnerabilities. I like this summaries, so I'm just going to post it. This feels like no failing tests when you're picking up a new repo. Yeah. Obviously, no failing tests when you're looking at a repo might mean, hey, they haven't written any tests yet, or they only have one. But nevertheless, there is a stronger feeling of, wait a minute, at least there's at least some signal that there's things are kind of on the ball from that. And I think that that's a really important point. Aaron wanted to clarify on that.
No, I think that was right on. It's also, yeah, and the idea is that you don't, like you said, you don't get this feeling of a guarantee from it. It's just another signal, another thing, and I think we have that sort of in the testing space really well.
Nice, cool. What else do I have? So also on the Omega side, so we released the tool chain, the Docker image, all that. I haven't gotten a ton of feedback on it, which is fine because it's mostly for our use, or at least that's what the primary user of it is. But if anybody else has picked it up and used it and has feedback, and you think other tools should be added, or you think it's whatever, it should just Docker build blah, and it should just build. We have used it to find things. I do have some plans on adding better support for scanning things like or like existing jar files, so you can just kind of point it at a thing and have it go. But if there are features that you think if it had, it would make the lives of security researchers easier. And the intent of this is always, it's a security researcher tool. It's not really meant for someone to plumb into their own, their own repo. Although I guess it could, but that's not really the purpose. Then please open an issue or, get in contact and whatnot.
Are there any particular communities, Michael, that you would like to get feedback from? You talk about, obviously, security researchers is pretty squarely aimed there, but is there any
I don't know right now. I think I might know in like 2 months. So we have a software engineer that's going to be starting soon. So I imagine part of their job, will be to kind of push on this tool a little bit further, and I think it'll show like where the edges are. I think the Java ecosystem is probably its least mature support. I think for the and just in general, the architecture is start with a package as opposed to start with a repo. So we probably need to think about that a bit too, because you can do some analysis on a Python or Node or whatever npm package, but a jar file is going to be compressed class files, and unless you're like decompiling and then trying to recompile or doing something weird, you're only going to get value if you go back to the source and then kind of start from there. So that support isn't too good at this point.
How does that compare with .NET?
Sorry
sorry to interrupt there. I was just going to ask you.
It's hard for us to know. Why don't you go ahead? I've already talked.
You were speaking of source code and so forth between Java and .NET. How does that compare, Michael?
Same thing. NuGet already existing NuGet packages are going to be. I believe I do IL spy against them, so that some of the things will work, but I don't believe CodeQL does a very good job with decompiled IO. SemGrep might do better, and which is why one of the it is kind of kitchen sinky, where like everything goes into a directory and then the tools are just like, go explore, tell me what you see. So having a little bit more rigor around that would be good too. David?
Yeah, so you were saying many of the tools want the source code. It doesn't do a lot with just the compiled versions. But I know there are tools that work on compiled programs. I mean, PMD and Spot Bugs, for example, are specifically Java tools that look at, I think, my apologies, I see too many tools, but I think both of them, at least one of them, works on the source versus the on the bytecodes instead of the source code.
I think you're right. Yeah, I don't remember which one, but I remember coming across under that. So see, that would be a great example of like, hey, you should use PMD or Spot Bugs or whatever instead.
Yeah, I mean, what you might want would be something where, really what you want to do is analyze both. You want to analyze here's what actually is going to be running, and some tools are designed for that. And then so do the analysis of the compiled package. And then ideally it can automatically figure out from that what is supposed to be at source code, what I would call the putative source code, and then go grab that and analyze that also.
Right.
And for extra credit, you can see if it rebuilds.
Yep.
It's a reproducible build.
Yep.
I'm sure this extra credit is just, if the package doesn't rebuild, it may not be a problem, but it may be.
Yep.
So our guys have done a test drive on the analysis toolchain, and they're right now consuming the results. So I will have some feedback when ready. I'll send it directly to you. And there was some minor issues, like there's a Python version, Python version 2 versus 3 mismatch for which it was not building, so it took some annoyance. So maybe some clarity, etc., needed there. As far as, and also the fact that the package needs to be provided, that was kind of like a stumbling block on, like, just to wondering about, like, okay, for a random project from GitHub, like what needs to be provided. There's kind of like at the starting point, but yeah, I mean, these are feedback that already have been discussed. I'll have some specific feedbacks when ready. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. You and not to go too far down in the weeds, but you should GitHub tags, I believe, are a valid package URL in the way that I use them. So I think it's like package : GitHub / foo/bar at tag name. I think it's something like that. So if you we can connect on it, but you should be able to do that if they're tagged. Yeah,
I didn't run the tool myself, but I've gotten feedback from the guys, so that's why I can't really say like exactly what the issues were, but there were some like minor niggling. But I mean, they could start in like a few hours or a couple of hours.
Awesome.
And a majority of that was actually because of the Docker build, which was taking, I think, about 3-4 hours to finish with CodeQL. One other thing which was not clear, as in we were not sure of like how to, because of the licensing of CodeQL and Radar, how could this be what are the implications of like running it on some other projects? So what we did was we actually created a build sans these two projects, CodeQL and Radar, and then I mean, we could run it on whatever we want just for trial. So is that what would be the recommended way of doing things? I mean, maybe that specific guidance of like there is note to the legal thing about like what can be run, what can this be run on, etc. But maybe some clarity on that would be good.
Yeah, that one's hard, and so that one is. So CodeQL, and I'm not a lawyer, so this is the official disclaimer of like, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but my understanding of the CodeQL licensing terms are that you can run it on, I believe, anything with an open source license with source on GitHub. I believe that's the thing. And the link to the CodeQL license should explain like that. Now, if those are true, which is true in the vast majority of cases, then you as a consumer should be fine, and you can run the toolchain. Now, if you wanted to run the Omega toolchain on your own proprietary source code, that may also be allowed through the CodeQL terms, but maybe not. And there are a couple areas which you definitely cannot, like, are not like allowed to do by the license. So you would have to, comply with those licenses. Sure. Similar with I think I didn't see Radari. I thought Radari was just like LGPL.
Yeah, it's LGPL. We just didn't want to like muck with, like, these two had licensing issues that were flagged, so let's take them out. And it actually helped the build. So with CodeQL, it took about 3-4 hours to build. Without it took like a few minutes. So that actually helped.
And the reason I pre-build CodeQL in the Docker container is it speeds up later execution significantly. Otherwise, it needs to recompile the rules each time it runs. And it'd be ephemeral at that point, so you don't do that. The other one is SNCC code. I believe I pushed an update to it to use SNCC code, but only if you provide the license key. So, we have a license key, so we can do that, and it should just be silent and fail happily.
We didn't get anything from SNCC or didn't hear anything about it. Mostly it was FPs from like SameGrep. That's what we were guessing. Getting most of them. Because we were running specifically on JavaScript and PHP projects just to see like what sort of results are being found in these cases.
Nice, very cool. So that actually segues nicely into the last thing that I'd like to just throw out there. So we have results. So we've, as part of Omega, we've collected the results from lgtm.com, which is like 350 something thousand projects. We have the infrastructure now. We can scan, entire ecosystems. The problem there is then we get a giant list of, millions and millions of findings, and the ability to efficiently look through that. And I don't mean like, how do you grep, but, we started on a portal, going back probably 6 or 8 months, to kind of bring in all these findings and show them in a per project or a per finding type, so you can do horizontal or vertical kind of analysis. And then you can triage it and say that, yep, this is a real thing. I'm gonna, it needs to be, needs to go out to the maintainer, or this false positive, or all these are false positive, or this tool is garbage, or whatever. And I'm thinking that there might be value. I mean, the intent was always to open source that when it gets to a point that we're not completely embarrassed by it. We're not there yet. But, I'm wondering if that would be of value to the larger community, where, just as a tool, I mean, you can run it locally, I guess. Where you can
I'm one of those people that says, as long as you're making it clear, like putting as version 0 point something, and maybe clearly stating it in a README, you're better off releasing earlier than waiting until it's all wonderful and perfect. Now, if there's a licensing question, hey, I don't know if it's legal for me to release something, that's a different matter. Go make sure that there's nothing that you're going to accidentally release that you don't have authority to do so. But as soon as you've made sure that it's legal to do, just post it. Even if you don't get feedback, you can always go back and said, yes, you had that opportunity.
Hey, Michael, just a check for understanding. This is and I'm sorry, I'm new to this, but this is the my understanding is alpha sort of the identification of the critical few on the Pareto projects, and then omega is sort of the longer tail of projects. Is that right? And on that, do you have any viewpoint or can the data tell us, like, what are the most used projects, and then what does the long tail look like by industry?
So there are, David has a great answer for this, for the.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that was a dump to me. So I'll make a first stab and I'll dump all the hard parts on Michael. People have very much worked on that. In fact, a number of years ago, I led an effort to do quantitative analysis to try to identify critical projects. And in order to scope it down, we specifically looked at the Debian packages, just to kind of, hey, let's focus on a specific scope, because at the time, there was just hey, there was some, let's hurry and get at least a reasonable analysis out. That's actually public, called Census One. Much more recently, Harvard did an analysis using SCA vendor data, when they basically averaged their Z-scores, and we can talk about that, which I thought was a very interesting and useful way to handle that. And they came up with a sorted list of what were the top dependencies as far as both direct and indirect dependencies go within language level packages, as opposed to the system level packages of, say, Debian. By the way, although we analyzed Debian, most of the other Linux distributions pull in a lot of the same packages. Heck, even a lot of the other distributions like the BSDs often end up using some of the same packages, because you want to use software that's reasonably high quality, does particular kinds of functions. And so while it's certainly not all the same, that's not true. There's a lot of overlap. Similarly, for the ecosystems within each of the ecosystems, certain packages showed up over and over and over again. I don't think you'd be terribly surprised by that. Although the timing was not where we would have liked. For example, Log4j was very high on that list. Would have been, would have been nice to know that before, but it's you wanted to do everything at once. So Census One and Census Two are publicly available. You can go take a look at them right now. You can complain about analyses, as with any analysis. I'm happy to tell you all the warts and everything, because you always have limited data sets. There's always challenges, any kind of analysis, but we do have some of this. There is a separate group called the Critical Projects Working Group, which has been, who actually, they were the working group that oversaw the Harvard work. And basically, they've been trying to take the various data sources and from that try to identify some sort of critical list. They do have a draft list now. They're in the process of trying to make things better. But I'll tell you, as someone who did Census One, and some of the challenges showed up in Census Two also, there's a lot of context you miss with the purely automated metrics-based analysis. I'll give you, for instance, in Census One, the mail transfer agents, MTAs, were really high because they're directly exposed to the internet. They process data in all sorts of crazy formats. But the reality is that very, very few people run fully open MTAs directly. So even though it had all the earmarks of, man, this is important, when you start asking, yes, but, it's more complicated. So it's my position that we really need to do all sorts of analyses and so on, but then add the human factor to add that information that otherwise, the quantitative analysis really misses.
So let me just editorialize to say, I think, and this may be an intersection point between OpenSSF stuff and Finno stuff, but there's a lot of people that care a lot about the answer to the question, what are the top used open source projects in investment banking and banking capital markets? And that answer may be industry dependent. Like I would hypothesize.
I think it is certain.
I would hypothesize that our use of NumPy and pandas is higher. I would also probably suggest that our use of OCaml as a language is probably higher than other industries, just to pick one, right? And so some of those, and every industry is unique. So that would just be, and then in the longer tail, looking at some of the projects that are in the longer tail. So that industry context, it just would be helpful for us. And that's why I was curious.
So for 2023, like for Alpha Omega, we are specifically looking at different verticals and how do we apply the not one size fits all, but it's, for whether it's medical or automotive or financial or whatever, like essentially what are your top end, and let us think about how to manage that. And some questions that are around there on funding, how do we, put that focus on those areas. But the intent, like obviously there are different, the curves are different in different, areas.
Yeah, and indeed the critical, this is actually an area that came up earlier this year. I mean, the critical projects working group, when it was kicked off, the theory was, hey, we're going to make a list, just looking broadly. And I still think that's appropriate, because when you start merging the verticals, you still find some things that are really, really common that it's worth everybody merge. But you're right, the particular verticals or particular organizations are going to have a different set. And so I think they've been talking about not just making a list and working out their process and making a list, but coming up with a process that can be franchised. Basically, hey, your organization's different, your vertical is different. Here's a process that we use, but you might want to reapply to your particular vertical because your answers are almost certainly going to be different. I haven't talked about this as much in a Finos setting, but I've talked with some government folks, particularly in the U.S. federal government, where they have exactly the same concerns. Their lists are not going to be the same as a generic general list. And I think that's right. And so eventually, I think it's incumbent on organizations and verticals to try to help identify the things that are unique. I would be unsurprised, just from undercurrents, I've heard that there's a non-trivial number of FinOS is not just Python, but Python 2. And what do you do there? So you can talk to that, Rob. But but that would be, there are interesting challenges, and I don't know, I have the full answers, but I do think that makes sense.
And frankly, that's why, applying like larger shovels and construction equipment on the Alpha side to larger challenges is kind of one area, even at the per industry, basis. And then Omega to just kind of absorb give us a list of another 1,000 projects. We'll put them in the backlog and just churn through them as we go. I think probably makes sense as an operating model. The theme for 2023 is going to be like, let's operationalize like what we've been doing and write it down and have something that's kind of repeatable that we can share.
Just related to that, a bit of just meta feedback or thoughts for what it's worth is that in terms of engaging with our industry, I'd say too that, I think, I know some of our other organizations from capital markets have been taking significant roles in OpenSSF. I would just say that I don't want to make a sweeping generalization, but I would share that it's probably a reasonably safe generalization to say that you'll have a higher rate of success if you want one of our developers to take something on, if you can suggest, hey, there's like one or two things we really need help on. Would someone like to help on XYZ? Rather than just put like a long list of issues in a GitHub thing, the chances that someone's going to go and just like and this isn't to say that we're the only busy industry, everyone's busy, but it's just kind of a thing. So
totally agree. Yeah.
One thing that is also related, just 1 minute comment. So Michael, you and I, when we were reviewing, for example, the PyPy results, you made a comment, or like we discussed about like the content of a file, not considering them as stained sources, etc. But I've had clients from specifically like Finos industries where these are also considered and are actually highly valuable. So it's dependent on a particular vertical. It's also the kind of threats. They're very, very different.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, if you told me that one of these things were going into a pacemaker or a space shuttle or another kind of can't fail system, the bar is going to be way higher than like this is part of a calendar widget on a startup website. But yeah, we should think about that. We are over. Thank you all very much for the conversation. This was amazing. Stay tuned and see you next month. And please engage on Slack or just get in touch.
And I would say a lot of us can't use Slack, so that's another thing. But another industry
send
wrinkle.
Email.
Yeah.
Yes, got it.
So.
Yeah, send email. You're not the only one. So
yeah, we there's some focus on us using channels right now. So
got it.
All right.
Got it.
Thanks. All right. Bye.